It's funny to think that I was so sure I was going to be fitting 6 months into this little B6 journal when I first set it up, because the month we're setting up here is probably going to be the last. After setting up these pages, there's probably not going to be enough space for another month, but before we get into it, let's have a look at how this month was going. One of the little experiments that I was trialing for myself this month was going straight from last month into the first week of this one. Normally I would have some kind of intro page. I've kind of been slowly paring it back. I used to do like a full monthly dashboard and cover page and monthly log and all of this other stuff, but I didn't really use them, so I pared back to just doing a mind unwind or brain dump space. Then, the month prior to this one, I didn't really use that page either. While I was a little concerned that it was going to feel strange just going straight into week 1 of the cycle, it actually has worked really well for me. So we have week 1, which you can see has been very well used, or decently used, I think. I managed to fill out all my routines, I put in all my meals, all of that kind of stuff, and then after this we get into the daily log spaces, or where I put in a header for each day and the task list of things that I want to get done. And amongst these we have some other little sections like a little mind unwind, a migrated space. Every so often there's an ideas list or something similar, and then after however much space I need for that, we have the next weekly dashboard, which is pretty much the same structure, just slightly rearranged. Although there aren't a lot of monthly collections or things that we would possibly typically see in journal setup videos, this system has been working really well, and so I think I'm probably just gonna keep on doing this. I always get a little worried, especially in making these videos, that it's like, oh, if you're not including new collections, then people won't care anymore, but I think it's just a good reminder for myself that what is more important is that I'm actually getting the use out of my journal that I want. I'm a big believer in purpose first, and for me the purpose is being a little decorative, having kind of a creative outlet, but also getting things done and organizing my life. And these layouts and the way that I'm setting them up is definitely helping with that. This list here is my future me problems, which I'm now turning into current me problems and trying to tackle. You can see I've made great progress at this stage. I'm sure that by the time this video actually comes out, I'll have some of them checked off, but for now, it's just a really big list. After this though, I have some more space to set up some more daily logs. We have a space for the week 4 dashboard, so priorities, meals, tasks for the week, and my routines. A little bit more space to do that daily logging, and then we have the end of cycle reflection. This one hasn't been filled in at this stage because we're not quite at the end of the cycle when I'm filming this, but on the next spread here is where we're going to start our setup for September. Although I let go of a mind unwind or brain dump space for this month, I thought that for next month it might be a good idea to bring it back. Mainly because over the last few weeks, I've been very one-track mind getting organized for our wedding. That one's going to be happening at the end of the first week of next cycle, so technically the pages that I'm setting up here are going to be used for that, but once that first week is over, then I'll be focusing on other things. It will definitely free up a lot of mental space for me to start thinking about other tasks and projects and goals, but because brains are made for having ideas, not for holding them, I want to have a spot in my journal to jot those down. I think that having this designated mind unwind spot for the very start of the next cycle is just going to help me get cool, calm and collected in the lead up to the big day, and it also means that any post-wedding tasks, the stuff that I want to do, I just can't get to in the very first week of the cycle, I won't have to keep ruminating on them or have them take up mental storage, and they'll have this safe space to sit until I can get to them. In terms of the structure of this one though, I wanted there to be plenty of writing space, but also some decoration, because if my journal looks nice, I'm more likely to use it. I didn't want that decoration to take away too much of the writing space though, especially given that we're working in a B6 notebook here, so the page real estate is definitely smaller than an A5, which is what I usually use. I've been finding that despite the smaller size of the notebook, I can still get away with having 2 columns per page, and I decided that this was going to be the month that I brought back the second line highlight. I love second line highlights for not only making things more readable, because it's easier to see separate entries onto any list or anything like that, but also it's just really good at adding some visual interest to the page, adding a little bit of color, and you can also use the second line highlights to essentially add boxes to your layouts without having to rule any of the borders. Rather than going in and ruling up columns for the layout, I can use the second line highlights to indicate the spaces that I'm going to be writing down my tasks. This functionality of the second line highlight is very useful when it comes to setting up my weekly dashboards, because I treat them to be very modular layouts. So we have a section or a module for a meal plan, a section section or a module for a priorities list. Rather than ruling those sections in, we can use the second line highlights to indicate the spaces for those. In terms of the decoration for the layouts, because I have a bit going on at the moment, I wanted to do future me a favor and select a decorative style that was going to be really easy. Something that wasn't going to take too much time, wasn't going to take too much effort, and I find the easiest way to do that is be very intentional about your decorative supplies. In particular, I decided to use some PET stickers from the washi tape shop. These ones come on a long roll, so you have heaps of different designs to pick from, depending on what corner of the layout you want to shove them into. And you also just have heaps of them in general, because I'm pretty sure the tape is like 6 meters long. I definitely will not need the full roll for all of the layouts I'm going to be setting up. But if you like this tape in particular, I've linked it in the description box for you. To accompany those ones though, I'm also using some pages from an old thesaurus, and while I do have to add an adhesive to those myself, I figured that if I go in all at once at the start of the month and put all of those pieces of paper down, then I won't have to do it when the month is actually underway. I find that task batching like that is also another great way to save myself some time. It means I don't have to get the supplies back out again and rip the pages up, stick them in, wait for them to dry and trim them back. I can just do all of that at once and then put things away properly. So it also saves me the hassle of having an untidy workspace. In terms of timing though, this layout took about 7.5 minutes to set up, that time not including pre-planning or typing, printing, and cutting out my headers, which we'll talk more about on the next layout. But I do certainly think that this one is going to be a very helpful layout for getting me cool, calm, and collected for the month ahead. I figure this one will probably get mostly used before the cycle or month actually starts. Just get everything out of my head and get it onto paper, especially in the lead up to the wedding, and then also like thinking about further ahead and what I'm going to do after that. But flipping over, the next layout we're going to set up here is going to be for week 1 of the cycle, which is the week of the 25th of August through to the 31st, or the week of my wedding. Even though it's going to be wedding week, the weekly dashboard is going to look exactly the same as it has for the past, I don't even know how many weeks. At least the last 2 cycles, mainly because it's just working really well. As we talked about on the last layout though, I'm going to be using the second line highlights to put in my different modules or boxes, because wherever those highlights stop essentially indicates the borders of the box. I'm also making use of the fact that when you go over the same spot with the Tombow dual brush marker, it darkens up that section, which can be really helpful for putting in tables with rows and columns. Just makes it a little easier to navigate any table sections I put in particular for things like trackers. The left-hand side of the layout is going to get my meal planner and my priorities list, while the right-hand side is going to get a weekly task list and my routine tracker, or habit tracker. I'm actually very pleased with how each of these elements fits onto the spread, especially because when I moved from an A5 into a B6, I was a little bit worried that I wasn't going to have enough space for this, especially considering when I was working in the A5, all I actually had was the priority space and the meals. I didn't routinely have a routine tracker, and I hadn't had a running weekly task list for quite a while. One of the ways that I figured out how everything was going to fit though was by going in and pre-planning how much space each section was going to take up, and rather than doing that in a written form, like going in and penciling in the layouts and then realizing they're not going to work, erasing them, repenciling them, I just do this digitally in a digital layout planner. We have a separate video on the channel about that process, which I've linked in the description box, along with a video we recently had which was all about printing headers for your journal. I do very much find that one of the fun ways to really lean into a theme when you're doing your setups is to change your lettering style to match the theme. Now, I don't necessarily know exactly how to describe the lettering style that I'm using in this setup, but when I looked at it, it just gave me the impression of music, which given that the decorative PET stickers feature a lot of musical notes, musical instruments, that kind of thing, I just felt like they matched together nicely and also added a little bit of character to the layouts. If I just wanted to use a simple script, I could probably draw that in myself, and I was considering doing it, but I liked that these ones were a little bit bold, but also kind of have the exaggerated thick and thin sections. It's not necessarily a font that I would use outside of this kind of setup, but I like that it's a little bit different to anything I've used before, and that's definitely why I like to print the headers and stick them in. Because while I could try to recreate that lettering style by hand, it would have taken so much time and frustration to get it into my planner in a way that I like the look of. So printing them off on sticker paper, cutting them out and sticking them in, I don't mind taking the time to do that. Similar to last month, I'm going to have the same sections for each of my weekly layouts, just changing up the arrangement of those. So maybe rather than having the meals and priorities on the left hand side every single time, in week 2 they'll go to the right hand page, and then in week 3 maybe they'll come back to the left. That's one of the things I really enjoy about modular layouts, is that you can get a different kind of feeling with each of them by keeping the modules the same, but just moving where they're placed. This also gives you an opportunity to play around with some different types of decoration, even if it's in the same style. So for instance, on this layout, I have the header for the overall spread and some decoration in the top left corner, whereas in another iteration of a weekly dashboard, maybe I'll put that decoration at the bottom and have that title at the bottom of the page. It is a little harder to achieve that level of flexibility or freedom if you're really utilizing all of the space for those different modules. For instance, if my meal plan had to take the entire length of that left-hand column, but with the sizes of the boxes that I'm using, I have a little bit of wiggle room. I also achieved this by making the tasks and routine spaces a little bit narrower than the full width of the page, because if they took up the full width, then that would mean that together they would take up a full page, which doesn't really give me a lot of flexibility there. Technically speaking, in setting up your planner or journal, you don't need to have flexibility. I just like it so that I can bring some novelty into the layouts so I don't get bored with my system. By having that flexibility not come from changing up the sections, but just changing up their placement, I also save time for myself because I know how much space I need for each of those sections. In terms of timing though, from first to final touches, this one took about 11 minutes to set up, but I do usually find that with each iteration of doing this for any month, the time taken on the subsequent weeks is less and less. In terms of the structure of this one though, we have a meal plan down the side here, we've got a priorities list for my goals and projects, a general task list for the week using the Alistair method so I can tie those tasks to the different days of the week, and then this is my routine or habit tracker. After this though is where I'm going to be putting in my daily logs or daily task lists, and I'll probably need at least 2 spreads for that. I don't go and pre-section in how much space I want for those, I just put in the header at the start of the day and use as much room as I need to. Then once that day is done, I go and put in the next one, but I do like to have some decoration. When it comes to my daily task list spaces, I have a lot of flexibility in how I approach the decoration here, because I'll essentially just make the daily task lists fit in whatever space I have left over, but I do find that I have some comfort spots to put decoration in, and usually that is the top and bottom corners. I like to do alternating corners, so for instance on this one we have the top right and the bottom left, and then on the next spread that I'll dedicate to dailies, that'll be reversed, so top left, bottom right. Because I'm using the second line highlights this month, I did want to go and put in a couple of those just so I could indicate the width of my columns, but I'm not going to fill this up for the entire of the page because I usually like to make sure that wherever a header goes, whether it be for a daily task list or a little migrated section like I'm putting on here, I don't want that to sit over the top of a colored in section, just because I like those headers to be quite distinct from the tasks that I'm going to be writing underneath them. In September I did try my hand at highlighting the entire of a page and just sticking the header wherever it ended up, but for purely aesthetic reasons I do like there to be that distinction between this is the header and this is the list. Also, given the sticker paper I use is transparent, it's a washi or a vellum type paper, it does mean you can see through it to underneath or where any kind of colored stripe would be, so I just have to hold off and put those lines in as I start using any of these daily spreads. That does make for a little bit more time taken for future Jess when she's actually trying to get in and use her planner, but I find I usually don't mind too much to make sure that the finished product of the page or the way it looks is the way I like it. Because as we said, if I like the way my journal looks, I'm more inclined to use it. The decoration of any daily log space only takes a couple of minutes though, with a much larger portion of time going to writing in my plans and figuring out what I need to do for any day, but I'm not going to be doing that here because we're not quite into the cycle yet. We have the little migrated section to start off the daily logging, because anything I don't get finished from this current month, I will bring it over. And then after that we have the rest of the spread and the rest of this spread for daily logging. I might end up needing more, but that's okay. It will come after the week 2 dashboard, which is essentially the same structure as week 1, just slightly rearranged, mainly for the small amount of novelty that it brings to the system, which of course makes me more inclined to stick with it. I like it when things feel new, even if they're not really all that new. Week 2 will also need its daily logging space, so we've got a couple of spreads for that. But then, by that point, we will be at mid-cycle, which means we'll need a spot for my mid-cycle check-in. Bringing these back in a more formalized capacity, and by that I essentially just mean actually writing it down rather than doing everything in my head, has done so many good things for my goals. Like essentially just keeping my progress at the front of my mind, helping me acknowledge that I am making progress, and also paying attention to the challenges I faced and the things that are or are not helping me tackle those challenges. By having a dedicated space in my journal to write them down, I'm a lot more intentional about the check-in, like actually doing it, and I always end up getting more helpful information out of it. While I can do a lot of this kind of like question and answering in my head, by having to write it down, I need to sort through my thoughts in a way that is more helpful. I'm essentially just better able to use any information that I get out of it. One of the reasons that I initially fell off with doing these mid-cycle check-ins though, was that I had set it up in a way that was very aspirational and not so realistic, or at least not realistic for the kind of like energy slump that I typically get at the mid-cycle point. Rather than having a very thorough, detailed, intense type of check-in, I really just wanted to strip it back to the essential parts that are really going to be instrumental in helping me achieve my goals. On the left-hand side, I'm putting in a space for wins, progress, challenges, and responses, and on the right, I'll end up with a space for routines and this cycle. Thinking about each of those individually, wins is essentially for outcomes, things that have happened or have come out of working towards my goals that feel like achievements or milestones. Progress, on the other hand, is stuff that I have done or am doing that is taking me where I want to go, but it doesn't really feel like a finalized accomplishment or a kind of outcome. It's more so just highlighting the fact that I'm working towards the things I want to be. As for challenges, that's pretty self-explanatory, but it's anything that has been hindering my progress on my goal, whether that's something that I'm doing specifically or something that's kind of outside of my control. And then responses is however I have responded to those challenges, whether it be positive or not so positive, mainly so I just pay attention to them and then can start to think about which ones I want to take forward with me and keep doing, and the ones that maybe I want to let go of because they're not really that helpful. As for the routines and this cycle space, routines is really just a check-in of those habits that I'm trying to build, looking at how many times over the last 2 weeks I will have successfully completed them, mainly because a lot of the time I don't find filling in a tracker to be all that motivating, or it doesn't really hold me accountable to doing the thing, whereas looking at the statistics at the end of the 2 weeks to say, okay, how many times out of 14 did you actually do the thing? That is information I find more useful, and essentially is the primary use for tracking the data to start with. If I pull those numbers out, it means I can better pay attention to the habits that are at risk of going in the reverse direction. So like maybe I have started a habit of not meditating rather than a habit of meditating. Maybe I've started a habit of not getting my water intake rather than one of doing that. But this cycle section is just to write down anything in particular that feels like it should be a priority for the remainder of the cycle, or the next 2 weeks, especially in the lead up to reset week, which is going to happen at the end of next cycle. Or for me, that'll be between the 22nd and 28th of September. I love reset week to give me that fresh slate feeling for the next quarter, but there is definitely preparation that has to happen before reset week to make it so that it feels like a proper reset. In terms of timing, from first to final touches, this one took about 6 minutes to set up, but that time again doesn't include any pre-planning or figuring out the spacings I was going to use. While the wins, progress, challenges, responses, and routines are all kind of a set size, this cycle space could expand if I have more things that I want to add in, and then after this is where I'm going to put in the remaining weeks for the rest of the cycle. Those pages will also hold reset week, and I've got plenty of space for all that. But flipping back so that we can flip through, I am quite excited to use these layouts, even though they're pretty much exactly the same as the ones that I have been using. I know that it has been working well for me. I'm very much in a season of journaling where I want to lean into those things that are working and not get too bogged down or worried about whether my journaling is right or enough, or if I'm doing it properly, because at the end of the day, if it's working for you, you're doing it properly. I mentioned a couple of other videos while we went through this one, those being how I pre-plan my layouts and how I print headers for my journal, and you can see those 2 videos on screen here. They're both super helpful tactics to help you get the most out of your journaling, so click or tap on either of those and I'll see you over there.